We have got a loaded show for you, kind of giving you a roadmap of where we're headed as we inevitably have to deal with Danny G's exultation over the Raiders being 2-0. Huge win last night to wrap up NFL Week 2 for the Raiders. They took it to the New Orleans Saints. This looked like a pretty talented Raiders team. Derek Carr, who prior to breaking his leg several years ago looked like an elite-level quarterback, looked like an elite-level quarterback again. And if you are a Raider fan, this is the best your team has looked since John Gruden was hired, if you consider the caliber of the competition. The Saints, I know, didn't look necessarily that great, but they beat the Bucs in Week 1. They're sitting at 1-1, where they find themselves very often. And look, Michael Thomas, this was why I told you on Fox Bet Live and why I said yesterday on the show, I said, if you look at the impact of elite-level wide receivers in the NFL, I think right now we are underrating what they mean to the overall team. And yesterday I made this argument, but I want you to follow me down the line here. What we saw last night was the Saints were nowhere near the same team without Michael Thomas. And in fact, Drew Brees has only played one game ever without Michael Thomas when Michael Thomas has been in the NFL. And if you look at Deshaun Watson without DeAndre Hopkins this year, what does he look like? Just an okay quarterback. Meanwhile, if you look at Kyler Murray with DeAndre Hopkins this year, what does he look like? A pretty fantastic quarterback. 2-0 for Kyler Murray with DeAndre Hopkins. 0-2 for Deshaun Watson without DeAndre Hopkins. How about the Minnesota Vikings? Look at what's going on right now with Kirk Cousins. 0-2 without Stephon Diggs. And you've got the situation with Josh Allen in Buffalo where they are 2-0 with Stephon Diggs. And that's why I told you that I liked the Raiders plus the 5 points, plus the 4 points, plus the 6 points, whatever the number you got from your guy. And by the way, I hope your guy is FanDuel.com. Keep telling you guys this. Go to FanDuel.com/Clay, my name, C-L-A-Y, and you get $1,000 free to gamble with if you're in one of the states where it's legal to gamble right now. And if you're not in a state where it's legal to gamble in right now, you go to FanDuel.com/Clay, you sign up. As soon as it gets legal in your state, they'll let you know. But right now, if you're in Pennsylvania, if you're in New Jersey, if you're in Colorado, if you're in West Virginia, if you're in Indiana, if you're in Illinois, if you're in Iowa, all those places you're listening to me right now, $1,000 free dollars, FanDuel.com/Clay. You'll be hooked up. You'll be ready to roll. But the reason why I told you that I liked the Raiders last night was because I thought the Saints, without Michael Thomas, were going to look substantially worse, like we have seen the Texans without DeAndre Hopkins, and like we have seen the Minnesota Vikings without Stephon Diggs. Now, the positive is, for Saints fans, Michael Thomas is going to be back. And so eventually I think you will get rolling again. Right now, Drew Brees not hitting his stride. The offense doesn't feel like it's functioning as well as it could. More alarmingly, that defense got picked apart last night. It really did. Nobody could cover Darren Waller. But I think in general, as you work your way through, there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about positive things that are headed in the direction of the Oakland Raiders. And I still think the Saints are going to be okay. And that is why I'm ready and prepared to go ahead and give you my top 5 and my bottom 5 in the NFL, as we typically do most Tuesdays during the course of this season. I didn't do it after week 1. Still had a lot of moving parts. Eventually meant to do it, and then I forgot. I'm going to be honest with you. So right now, what we're going to do to start off the show is, now that we have seen the Raiders and we know exactly what's going on there, I'm going to go ahead and give you my top 5 and my bottom 5 in the NFL. Okay? Are you ready? My number 1 team in the NFL right now, the team that I think has looked better than anybody else, is the Ravens. The Ravens have been the best team in the NFL, bar none. I got to tell you, there is no way to quibble with anything that they have accomplished so far. They have been dominant against the Browns. They were dominant against the Texans. They look like they haven't skipped a beat since last season when they were on a roll. Ravens are the best team in the NFL right now. Second best team in the NFL right now, I think you have to go with the Packers. And the Packers have been dominant against two okay teams, probably, right? They beat the Vikings, and they handled the Vikings with ease, and that looked a little bit suspect because the Vikings weren't very good in week 2. But the Packers also took care of the Lions pretty easily, so they are one of the few teams that's not only 2-0, they're 2-0 in their division. I think you have to put the Packers right now as the second best team in the NFL. All right, who's the third best team in the NFL? I would probably say right now it's the Seahawks. The Seahawks, with the way Russell Wilson is playing, for a time during Sunday Night Football, he had more touchdown passes than he did interceptions. His only interception just went right through Greg Olson's hands. Right now, the Seahawks, 9 touchdown passes with Russell Wilson. He's the leader in the clubhouse to be the MVP. 9 touchdown passes, 1 interception. And again, that pick wasn't his fault. He's playing next level football. I have questions about the Seahawks defense, particularly with the Irvin injury and whether or not they're going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback as it comes down the stretch. Certainly the NFC West is an incredibly talented division as well. But I would say right now the Seahawks have looked better than anybody else in the NFC West. In the 4 spot, I'm sticking in the NFC West. About the Rams. They beat the Cowboys in week 1, and then they went on the road and they absolutely dominated the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams are already 2-0 against the NFC East. It's a shame that they don't get to play in the NFC East because I think they would likely be the number 1 division winner there. They'd get to host a home playoff game. And then right now in the 5 spot, I understand some of you are going to say, oh, Clay, you're crazy. There's no way to justify this. I think if you look in the 5 spot right now, I think you have to go with the Arizona Cardinals. So I've got 3 teams from the NFC West right now in my top 5. Now, teams that are just outside the top 5, deserving of some attention, I think, based on their records. Again, I think that you could say the Raiders, believe it or not, with their 2 wins, although I'm not sold at all on the Carolina Panthers, and the Raiders were arguably fortunate to win that game. The Chiefs, I believe, will be one of the top teams in the NFL, but I don't think if you're a Chiefs fan and you watch the way your team played against the Chargers, I don't think you can leave that game thinking, oh, we looked so phenomenal. There's no way to attack our position there. So I would go with the Chiefs outside of the top 5 right now. I would go with the Steelers outside of the top 5 right now. Yes, you're 2-0, but as I said earlier in the week, it's a wobbly 2-0. The Bills are 2-0, but I'm not really sold on the Bills at 2-0. And the Titans are 2-0, but I'm not really sold on those teams either. That's all the 2-0 teams right now. So I would say the 5 teams, the Ravens, the Packers, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals are right now the 5 teams that are deserving of the most attention for being the best out there. What about the list of sadness, as I call it? Who are the 5 worst teams in the NFL right now as you sort of count down and try to approximate who's actually been really bad, who's really bad? The Jets are the worst team in the NFL. I'm sorry, Jets fans. I think even Jets fans are kind of nodding. You're like, you know what? There has not been very much of a reason at all to feel good about your team if you are a Jets fan. So I think the Jets right now are the worst team in the NFL. I would also say, and this is a little bit unfortunate for the city of New York, the Giants are bad. And they weren't awful in the first game, and they were competitive against the Bears. And by the way, the Bears are also 2-0 if I left them out. I can't remember if I did or not, but they're wobbly. They could easily be 0-2. But with the loss of Saquon Barkley, I feel like you are putting so much more additional stress onto Daniel Jones, and already you didn't have a large margin for error. So the 2 worst teams, I think, in the NFL right now, I'm sorry, New York City, I believe the Giants and the Jets are the 2 worst teams in the NFL right now. Then it gets a little bit complicated, but I'm going to have to put the Eagles here. And I think it's crazy because Carson Wentz has got a $100 million contract. But if you just look at what's gone on this year, you lost to the Washington football team. And other than the first half against that team where you were up 17-0 before you fell apart and Carson Wentz got sacked 8 times and he got hit 13 times, this has looked like a really bad football team for the other 6 quarters. The NFC East is atrocious, but I think you got to put the Eagles there as the third worst team in the NFL right now, counting backwards. And then this is a little bit unfair because I feel like they have played two really tough teams, but when you really break it down, the last two teams are probably going to have a lot of movement on this part. I think you have to put the Dolphins in, even though they were fairly competitive so far. They did lose both of those games, and I just haven't been that impressed by the Dolphins so far. And then I think you probably have to slide in the Broncos. Even though the Broncos have been super competitive, I think you have to factor in Drew Lock. And it's possible that the Titans and, you know what, I'm going to take the Broncos out. Because the Broncos have lost to teams that are 4-0. The Steelers and the Titans haven't lost to anybody else. And I think I probably have to slide in as I look at my list that I have, kind of here, and I sometimes make decisions on the fly. I think you probably have to slide in the Lions, just given how bad they looked. And I hate to do that because the Lions should have beaten the Bears, and there are a lot of teams through here. So I'm going to scratch out the Lions, and I'm going to go with the Bengals. All right? I do think there's a lot of reason for optimism, and that's why I hate to, kind of bring in the Bengals and even take a shot at them here. But that's an improvement to not be the worst. So my bottom five teams, counting down, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Jets. There are many teams that are in the running here. The Lions are in the running. The Broncos are in the running. The Texans are in the running. But you look at some of the teams that those guys have played against. For instance, I think the Texans have been bad. But how many teams could look bad playing the Chiefs and the Ravens back-to-back weeks? And by the way, 6 days from now, how good is that for a Monday Night Football game in Week 3, Chiefs-Ravens? Might be the game of the year in the third week of the season to be able to see exactly what's going to go on there. I can't wait to see how that process is going to play itself out. So in general, that is where we are heading. By the way, remember, the Texans have to go to Pittsburgh too. I told you before the season started, one of my predictions on this show, I said I think the Texans are starting 2-5 or 1-6. And part of that's because DeAndre Hopkins is going to be gone, but also because their front-loaded schedule is so brutal that probably the only team they're going to be favored to beat is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, if you're a Texans fan right now, and I know they've had a couple of years where they have started slow, but if you look at this schedule and you consider the way that they have played, I don't know who Bill O'Brien must have done. He got the Nebraska schedule of the NFL because you go on the road against the Steelers Sunday. Tough to win in Pittsburgh no matter what. That's a tough situation. Then the Vikings come to town. Maybe that's a game the Texans could be expected to win. They could be 0-3. They could be 1-2. The Titans go on the road against the Vikings. Then the Jags come to town, and that's a game you felt like, oh, we should be able to win that one. But right now, the Jags have looked better than the Texans. I've loved what I've seen from Gardner Minshew. And then the Texans go on the road against the Titans. That's a tough game. And then the Packers come to town, and then they go on the road against the Jags. So that's the first 8. I mean, I really see the Texans as sitting at 2-6, maybe 1-7. I'm just telling you, this is an ugly situation for the Texans, and I think it's going to continue to bring back the fact that Bill O'Brien chose to trade away DeAndre Hopkins because of how good the Cardinals have looked so far. So let me run through the top 5 again. Now that we've got NFL Week 2 in the books, we're going to bring in Danny G here in a minute. He's been chomping at the bit. I'll give him an opportunity to talk about how amazing his Raiders looked. And then, by the way, Jason Whitlock's going to join us at the end of the hour, and he'll hang with us for hour 2 as well. The Ravens, the Packers, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals are my 5 best teams in the NFL. My 5 worst, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Jets. That is where we are headed. I appreciate all of you hanging out with us. I just told you as part of this discussion, hey, if you love the NFL and you like to gamble, college football is also back. The SEC is back. I love to gamble. I do a gambling TV show every day. FanDuel.com/Clay. Get hooked up now. FanDuel.com/Clay. You can get $1,000 free roll just by going to sign up today at FanDuel.com/Clay. I appreciate all of you hanging out with us. When we come back, we'll talk with Danny G about his belief, I'm sure now,